From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 581. I'm Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, DP3 in the forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, the playoffs roll on, and basketball is always on our minds, past and present, real and virtual, and we like to talk about it, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, for today's main topic, we're actually tackling the real hardwood. We will discuss our favorite highlights in basketball history, followed by having a quick debate about the virtual hardwood, which game I should start the next NLSC tournament on. So, Andrew, much like many of our listeners, we have been watching basketball for decades. We have experienced countless edge-of-your-seat moments, but there are certain ones that we think about more often, highlights that stand out. So this episode is dedicated to those moments. Now, for me, I just chose the first three that came to mind, because how many have we lived through, right? We could have the show last 5 hours.
Yeah.
If we were really talking about all the great moments and great highlights that we've seen in basketball history. So I chose the first three that came to mind. So I'm going to throw it over to you first, though. What is one of your favorite highlights in basketball history?
I mean, like you say, there are just so many. And me being a Michael Jordan fan, most of them for me are related to Michael Jordan. Not all of them, of course, because growing up I enjoyed the entire league, watching a galaxy of stars perform. But obviously, Michael Jordan, being my favourite player, often produced many of my favourite highlights. And one that came immediately to mind for me was his dunk on Dikembe Mutombo in 1997. And it's not his greatest dunk, his most powerful or spectacular dunk that he's ever thrown down, but I was still a fairly newly minted basketball fan at that time, just right into it, loving watching the Bulls in 1997. I mentioned last week that the 97 Bulls are one of my favorite teams to watch, and just the lead up to that moment, the confrontation, I use the word very loosely, at the All-Star weekend, where Mutombo was talking about how Jordan had never got him, never been able to dunk on him. MJ promised that before he was retired from the NBA, he certainly would. Just that great play, the cut baseline, Luke Longley, the Aussie, feeding him the ball, going up, dunking on Mount Mutombo, who sent back so many shots, including some of MJ's, obviously, and wagging the finger, doing Mutombo's finger wag right back at him. Yeah, that was a very memorable dunk.
So the interesting thing about that, and you kind of alluded to it, is that is by far one of the weakest dunks Jordan ever did, as far as how much height he got, right? How much power was in the dunk, the style, etc. But it was the moment, and it was the meaning behind the moment, right? It was the fact that it was on Dikembe Mutombo. It was the fact that he said he was going to get him, and he did. Right. And then he taunts Dikembe Mutombo using Dikembe's famous taunt. So I love that you chose that one, because in reality, just at face value, that is not one of Michael Jordan's top 500 highlights. Right.
Yeah.
As far as like the sheer difficulty of it, et cetera, or even beauty of it. But yeah, that moment stands out for you because it's like, yeah, he got Mutombo like he said he would, right?
Exactly.
That's
yeah.
MJ. So for me, MJ at number one as well for the first play I thought of. It has to be his layup versus the New Jersey Nets,
Incredible.
which took place on February 16th, 1991. I have not seen a layup like it. It wasn't your standard reverse layup. He didn't take off from one side of the backboard on the baseline and finish it on the other side of the backboard. He took off from an awkward angle, maybe a 45-degree angle from the front of the rim, took off and hung in the air while passing through multiple defenders, at the same time moving his body mid-air under the hoop and coming up on the opposite side and finishing it. And I think it's often called the triple clutch layup, right? If you're triple clutching in the air, you're in the air for a long time, Andrew. That is some serious hang time. And the Nets bench reaction said it all. They knew how rare and ridiculous that play was. And even to this day, in my opinion, it's just as ridiculous as the first time that I saw it. And to make the play even more special, the Nets were wearing those like powder blue, light blue jerseys that year. And I think that makes that highlight stand out even more. But just the level of difficulty on that layup, just ridiculous.
Incredible. As I said, Horace Grant's favorite highlight. And Horace Grant is not the biggest fan of MJ these days, but still think he acknowledges the greatness of moves like that and of MJ in general. And I've seen some people say that, oh, everybody does what MJ did these days. Nobody is doing that. No one else has done that. There have been some other players with tremendous leaping ability, gliding ability, Glide the Glide, obviously. Clyde Drexler, one of your favorite players. But nobody has made a move like that. I've never seen a move like that. Weaving in and out of players, twisting around like that, making it look so smooth, and people say, oh, it's slowed down. And every replay gets slowed down so we can see exactly what happened. But even in real time, it looks incredible. It looks so impossible. But that was what MJ did, made the impossible look possible.
Yeah, people on social media will show like a standard reverse layup where the guy takes off from the baseline. I think one of them was Grayson Allen, right? They showed a highlight of Grayson Allen doing a routine reverse layup where he goes up on from one side of the backboard, finishes it on the opposite side. That is a layup. I can do that, right?
Yeah.
I see that happen in the men's leagues, the local leagues that I play in and whatnot. It's not even close to the same layup that Jordan did against the Nets. You've got to see where he took off from, how far, and the location. It's not on the baseline, and how he's finishing through defenders on the opposite side of the hoop, and the English he had to put on the ball, and all of it just absolutely. I've just never seen that highlight like that since, or from prior, watching the history of the game and everything. Just crazy stuff. So what about you? What's the second one you thought of?
So from a dunk that wasn't one of MJ's best to one that was definitely one of Derrick Rose's best, Derrick Rose's huge dunk in the 2011 Eastern Conference Finals over Joel Anthony, NLSC Forum favorite, of course. That series obviously didn't go the way that I wanted. After they won that first game, I was thinking, wow, they might make a run to the finals. I might be seeing the 7th championship on the real hardwood, not just the virtual hardwood, as I've given the Bulls many 7th championships and sometimes an 8th and 9th as well in my franchise and career mode games. But yeah, Derrick Rose, his MVP season, I don't care what anyone says, Derrick, he deserved that MVP the way he was playing, been the driving force behind that resurgence that year and playing as well as he did. Just taking off like that, throwing it down hard over NLSC Forum favorite Joel Anthony. Yeah, that was very exciting.
He bodies Joel Anthony on that one too and extends his arms and throws it down. I was just watching that highlight while you were talking, and I'm just blown away by his athleticism. He's in conversation for the most athletic point guard to ever play when healthy. He has that quick leap that Russell Westbrook had, that he gets into the lane and it doesn't look like he's going fast enough to really take off. And he somehow does this quick leap, this explosion off the floor, and he's way above the rim. And it's almost weird looking, but in a good way. When you see short players do that, right? When you see point guards do that, it looks superhuman. And that highlight, he absolutely looks superhuman.
Just explosive. He just elevates, doesn't he?
He does. So for me, the second highlight I thought of, March 15th, 1992, Larry Bird's leaning running three that he hit against the Portland Trailblazers. That three sent the game into overtime, and then the Celtics ended up winning in double OT. Hurtback Bird, had a monster triple-double in that game, scoring 49 points while adding 14 rebounds and 12 assists. Even making the moment bigger, the Trailblazers were the hottest team in the West, right? And they ended up making the NBA Finals that year and losing to Jordan and the Bulls. Drexler had 41 points in defeat in this game. But the level of difficulty on that shot that Bird made was insane. He has to catch the ball, spin, and fire a one-handed three off of 1 foot, falling forward, almost falling down, with Drexler all over him. This is the last year of Larry Bird. This is hurt back Larry Bird. You never knew if he was going to play or not because, the condition that he was in. And that shot stood out to me and was a huge moment in my household when it happened. We were screaming at the TV.
Oh, Larry Bird just had that knack, didn't he? I mean, people talk about Steph Curry being the greatest shooter of all time, and I understand the argument, but the shot making of Larry Bird, could shoot it from anywhere and make such incredibly difficult shots like that. Yeah, tremendous player, and people to this day still underrate Larry Bird. Was that the same game, or am I mixing it up, that he also faked a pass in a circle? What game was that?
That was actually against the Indiana Pacers.
Oh, that's right, yes.
When he did that, and that was in the 1991 playoffs,
right, yeah.
where he did a couple ball fakes and then he took the shot.
That's one of my favorite Bird favorites.
Knocked it down. Yeah, I mean, that's legendary, right? That's on a lot of the Larry Bird highlight reels. But the thing about that Trailblazers game, too, is that they tried so many different defenders on Bird. You know, they had Cliff Robinson on him, I believe, at one point. Jerome Kersey. I think Buck Williams took a shot at him. Drexler was on him, and including on that final play. And he was just unstoppable. And it had nothing to do with his athleticism. It had all to do with his brain, right? With his basketball smarts, with his knowledge of how to use what he had, like his footwork and his body and whatnot. And, you know, you watch the highlights of that game and he's just hitting effortless rainbow shots over, you know, Cliff Robinson and Clyde Drexler, etc. He's just making it look so easy. And the ball is, you know, going through the hoop and exploding the net. And I just am so impressed with players like Bird who, you know, they've lost some of their quickness. They've lost their athleticism. They're fighting injuries, and they're still putting on these special performances because they just know how to use what they have. And that was that 49-point game, that win against the Trailblazers, that shot, that was an example of that.
No, absolutely. And once again, people really underrate Larry Bird.
Oh, of course they do. And you know what? That's going to be the standard for the rest of our lives, right?
Unfortunately,
we're going to be seeing those comments, whether it be from the media and then, of course, in turn, the fans, et cetera. And I say fans loosely, right? Quote, fans, end quote, and whatnot. But, you know, if you really understand the game of basketball, you really understand the history of the game, you can see that Larry Bird was just an incredibly special player with just all the skill and smarts in the world. And it doesn't matter which era you put Larry Bird in, he would be dominant. He would be an absolute force, and he would be an incredible leader and a winner.
Just tremendous basketball smarts. You know, not the most athletic by NBA terms, by regular people terms, absolutely a great athlete, but just a tremendously skilled and smart player. I totally agree. So look, I could fill this list with Michael Jordan highlights, and it's very tempting to do that, so I will make an honorable mention before I get to my third highlight here. The final shot in 1998, the game winner in the 1998 NBA Finals, such an iconic shot in NBA history, would have been a hell of a way to end his career. As much as I have come to like the Wizards' comeback, it is a shame that we didn't have that bookend to his career in some respects. Does it take away from his greatness that he came back with the Wizards? Absolutely not, but that was certainly a storybook ending and an iconic highlight. But I'm going to go with Allen Iverson on Antonio Daniels. And you know the one I'm talking about, Derek.
He makes Antonio Daniels fall on one hand.
Yeah, fantastic ankle breaker. I was watching that one live, and like you say, edge of the seat, jumping out of your seat moments. Yeah, that definitely did it for me. Just watching Daniels fall, Iverson leaving him in his wake to make that move, actually made it into his highlight reel in NBA Live 07. Not one of my favorite games, obviously, Derek, but the PS2, PC, Xbox version had those reels going on, those highlight reels in the background of the main menu. That was Allen Iverson's reel, and deservingly so. Funnily enough, he was traded to the Nuggets shortly into the 2007 season, so that highlight reel became quickly outdated, although watching Iverson highlights never gets old. But yeah, enjoyed that a little bit more than watching MJ get crossed up in 1997. Fantastic move, obviously. But yeah, I'll have to go with that crossover on Antonio Daniels because that was a true ankle breaker.
Yeah, that play stands out for Iverson. But being the Jordan fan that you were and a Bulls fan, I'm curious, what were your thoughts about the attention Iverson's crossover on Jordan got when, you know, Iverson was a rookie and he crossed over Jordan and scored? And whatnot. Did that attention that he got and that play got bother you at all? Or was it something where you were like, hey, Iverson's going to be great. He's up and coming. Sure, he got Jordan on that one, but hey, it's Michael Jordan, and nothing can diminish Michael Jordan's legacy, etc.
I think I appreciate it more in hindsight. At the time, it was fuel for the haters, and it kind of still is to this day. And people do forget about that. They talk about people hating on current players, LeBron, etc. And somebody brought it up to KG and said, well, nobody hated on MJ back in the day. And KG was like, yeah, they did. They absolutely did. People do hate on the top players as much as they admire them. So that was definitely fuel for the anti-MJ crowd. So it annoyed me at the time. Iverson made a statement at the time saying he didn't respect MJ. He meant fear, but he misspoke and said respect. That kind of turned me against AI for a while there at the start of his career, this brash young rookie that I kind of appreciated on one hand, but at the same time, you're saying that about the best player in the league, the best player of all time. I didn't much care for that, especially, again, because it fed into the anti-MJ sentiment that was there from so many people bitter about having him beat up on their teams. Just saying. But, yeah, I did kind of dislike AI momentarily for that, and it wasn't really about him, apart from the him misspeaking. It was more about how it gave them fuel for the fire for the anti-MJ sentiment. But in hindsight, look, you get a great defender, one of the best perimeter defenders of all time with that move. Yeah, you got to respect it.
And you know that Iverson misspoke because
absolutely,
listen to him in interviews after that. All he's done is talk about how MJ inspired him to, be who he was on the court, right? How he talked about how great MJ was and how starstruck he was when he was able to play with him when he came back and played for the Wizards, in the All-Star game and whatnot. And he talked about Jordan, I believe, during his Basketball Hall of Fame speech, etc. And I watched the Iverson documentary. I want to say it was on Netflix and whatnot. And he brings up MJ several times, right? And MJ's his GOAT and all of that. So obviously he's misspoke in that moment. So for the last one I'm going to bring up, the last highlight, and again, these were the first three that came to mind. And this one might surprise you because it's kind of recent and it's from a current player. So February 27th, 2016, Steph Curry's game winner versus the Thunder. My jaw dropped. It was a heavily guarded three. He was being guarded by Andre Roberson from logo range, from the deepest part of the floor. And he had 46 points and 6 assists that game. My brother and I were watching the game live, and we both yelled out at the same time, "No way," when he pulled up and splash. Just an unreal moment. He was getting Steven Adams on an island in that game and just hitting some of the most ridiculous shots. Just stuff I had never really seen before, Andrew. And I think Steph Curry is just an incredible player. I think he is special in so many ways. Not just because of the winning, not just because of, some of the numbers he's put up. It's just the way he operated on the floor and the skill set that he had, the ball on the string, the being able to shoot from anywhere on the floor, being as clutch as he has been overall in his career, etc. That game floored me. And that shot sticks out because I may have said no way, but because Curry was playing at such a high level in that game, I thought that was going in, and it did. But what an incredible, incredible shot.
Andre Roberson, of course, now engaged to Rachel Demeter, former host of NBA 2K TV, of course. Yeah, I watched that one on TV as well, and I also marveled at it. That was Steph Curry at his impossible shooting best. And shots like that have not only been incredible to watch in real life, but those kinds of shots from Steph Curry kind of forced 2K to change the way they design the game, bringing in the badges, the limitless range badges and things like that, just to account for that uncanny shooting ability, trying to capture real life in a video game. And we often talk about video game performances and how things on the virtual hardwood are so ridiculous and, someone could never do that in real life. You're trying to capture those incredible shots in a video game and make them feel realistic. That was tough.
And that shot was at the peak of Curry's powers. right? That was the 15-16 season. And it's when they were starting to make changes in the video game to accommodate the stuff that Steph Curry was doing. If you remember correctly, when that shot was made, that was during the NBA 2K16 release cycle. And if you remember, there were patches that were going through during that game cycle that were supposed to accommodate the way Steph Curry was playing. So you were dead on with that assessment. So, Andrew, those are the three that first came to mind for us. Were you surprised that the three that came to my mind first had, there were no dunks? There wasn't a highlight that I mentioned. Because you know how much I love.
Oh, absolutely.
Dunks and dunk highlights. Did that surprise you?
A little, but thinking about it, there's been so many dunks. I mean, like you say, the dunk that I picked for MJ is perhaps not even his top 500 of spectacular highlights. Certainly memorable, but not necessarily spectacular. And it makes a lot of lists because of the importance, as you said. But yeah, trying to pick a favorite dunk, I'm thinking of maybe Sean Kemp or Dennis Rodman in the 96 finals, and when he landed on his shoulders on that reverse dunk, things like that. Then I could name 10 others, and even struggling to come up with a top 10 because there's just been so many. So I get it.
That's the thing, right? Because obviously the Lister Blister would be up there for me. Yeah. Kemp's dunk on Alton Lister, and Daryl Dawkins climbing up a defender and stretching out his arm and throwing it down on them. Yeah, I would have. Oh, what about Paul Pierce's isolation where he's trash talking Al Harrington, right, in the playoffs, and then he hits a really deep three on him. Like, I could go on all day about highlights that were just incredible to me that I loved. But yeah, we can't do a 5-hour show.
No,
so
tempting as it is. Here we are. But before we get to our community responses, I do want to throw one more out there as an honorable mention. Dwayne Wade's block and then three-quarter court shot. Do you remember that one? That was awesome.
Yeah, I think that even more than that, Dwayne Wade's spin dunk, I think it was on Anderson Varejao.
Ah, yes.
That was just absolutely incredible and jaw-dropping when I saw it, the way he threw that down just off of a spin move, etc.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at NBA-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So let's get to the community's responses. We'll start with Twitter. T Gentry at Bucky T states, when Baron Davis dunked on Karolinko in the 2007 playoffs, that was epic. And I believe he raised his shirt up after he dunked on Karolinko. That was a giant moment. And I actually kind of captured that same dunk on NBA 2K14. You commented on that highlight. I wasn't against the Jazz when I did the dunk, but I kind of captured the move very well and the dunk that he did in real life. But yeah, that was huge because obviously Golden State, they were the underdogs. They weren't expected to be there, even though they had a lot of talent and whatnot. And that was a statement play.
The We Believe Warriors. People mentioned them last week as a favorite, and I think we can certainly relate to that as well. Yeah, absolutely love that dunk. Whenever I'm getting screenshots from an article about Live 07 or 2K7 or NBA 07 and a 2007 season game, I always try and imitate that dunk to some respect. Have Baron Davis in that jersey going up against Andre Kirilenko in that jersey and throwing it down. But yeah, you were able to recreate it pretty well.
Stasho Bro at Nate Stasho, Live 01 Legend states, LeBron's block in Game 7, 2016, and then his almost dunk on Draymond Green to seal the championship. He states it's the peak of his sports fandom. And if I remember correctly, too, with that dunk that he missed on Draymond Green where there was a foul, there was this long pause after the play because there was a thought that he hurt his hand or something like that, or hurt his wrist and whatnot. When I say he, I mean LeBron. And for me, watching that, I just felt like it was more antics and more drama and whatnot because he didn't hurt himself and whatnot on that play. But like obviously Nate and Roger, both from Ohio and whatnot, being huge Cavs fans. That probably couldn't get any better for them.
I mean, that huge championship drought in Cleveland across all sports and big 3-1 comeback. And it's funny that I was actually going for the Cavs in those finals because, you know, the Warriors had beaten the Bulls 72-10 record, and people were talking about them as being the best team of all time. And that inner child, that inner Bulls fanboy from my childhood was going for the Cavs as the underdog, kind of, going into that series. And of course the narrative flipped, and now it's become the proof that LeBron is the GOAT for a lot of people. And well, I certainly see the argument, even if I disagree with it. I will say that Kyrie Irving deserves more credit for that big shot he hit as well. But that was a huge block, one of the most memorable blocks that I can remember in the NBA Finals. And yeah, I totally get it being the peak of your fandom, because there's nothing quite like seeing your team win the championship.
Yeah, I mean, you seem far more willing to discuss the whole Jordan LeBron thing, even though it disgusts you, more than I do. I have absolutely no interest in even going as far as you just did. So,
I mean, I'll leave it there too. But
I think it's just, I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of the BS. In that series, I was rooting for Golden State because I like the team better. I like the players on the team better. I like the style of basketball overall that they played and whatnot. So I was rooting for the Warriors there. Next, Stephen at the Live King shows a GIF of, and I know you remember this one,
yep,
Reggie Miller pushing off on Michael Jordan to get an open three, which he does knock down. And the Pacers win that game. Obviously, they do not win that series, and the Bulls went on to win the title. And then he also shows a GIF of Vince Carter from his retirement ceremony in Toronto, and he states Vince's jersey retirement in Toronto.
Yeah, it's funny how people don't talk about that being a push-off, but they talk about the push-off in the finals, don't they? The NBA finals that year. Just goes to show if you don't win the series, people do forget about winning that single game. That being said, I mean, that kind of physicality, they did let that go at the time, and that was still a tremendous shot, so I can't hate.
Moving over to Discord, QB1120 states, the first one that comes to mind is Vince Carter over Frederick Weiss, or one of his dunk contest dunks, but honorable mention to one of Blake Griffin's many highlights as well, maybe the spin move dunk on Gallinari. Obviously, Vince Carter's dunk on Frederick Weiss can be argued as the greatest dunk of all time, as he absolutely clears him and throws it down. And it's funny where this conversation went actually on Discord, because QB1120 ends up changing his answer. Pep says elbow pass by Jason Williams is one of them. And then later on states, like White Chocolate said himself, LaFrance was fouled. And he was, and whatnot, which is too bad because it kind of thwarted the finish of that great play. But QB1120 went on to state, actually, I take that all back. It's probably the Jeremy Lin game winner in Toronto on Valentine's Day. I had actually stopped watching basketball for a bit, and Jeremy Lin got me back. Yeah, Linsanity was crazy, right? And he was putting up great performances, not just against the average or weaker teams in the league. Remember his, performance against the Lakers as well, where I believe he scored 37 or 38 points. He had that spin move around Fisher for the layup. Just was absolutely electric in that game. And I definitely remember getting caught up in Linsanity and checking box scores and, seeing, how he was doing through all of it. And that three on Calderon, it's like you knew, because it was Jose Calderon who was standing in front of him. You just knew Lin was going to hit that shot. And he's casually dribbling at the top of the key, waiting for the, clock to wind down. And he takes like one dribble and just pulls up right in Calderon's face and knocks it down. And that was like peak Linsanity right there, right? you can't get any better than that. So I love that he brought that up.
It really was exciting, and I wonder if we'll ever really get that again, especially with the explosion of social media and how things really get run into the ground now through social media and just overhyped and things like that. It felt very organic that we were seeing Jeremy Lin become this prominent player and put up these numbers and get moved into the starting lineup and continue to thrive. And I remember watching the Lakers game and watching him duel Kobe and out-duel Kobe, really, in that game for the win for the Knicks. So it really was special, and that game winner, yeah, it was very cool. I was watching that a little while ago when I wrote a Way Back Wednesday on Linsanity, actually, and was reflecting on how it affected games as well, how we had to have a huge ratings update in the next roster update for NBA 2K12 because he just came out of nowhere as he did with that Linsanity. So, yeah, really special time, and like I say, the organic nature of it, and the highlights as well, but the organic nature of that whole movement, and it's just a shame that it came to an end so quickly with his injury, and he never really reached that level again. But yeah, a very special time in the early 2010s.
I just want to point something out. I tell this story, but obviously I don't think I predicted Linsanity, but I'm going to say that I saw something special in Jeremy Lin before he ever made an impact in the NBA. I was watching the D League, actually. He was playing in it at the time, and he was just having an incredible game. And my roommate got home, and I was like, "Have you ever heard of this guy before?" And he's like, "Who?" He's like, "Jeremy Lin. Like, have you ever seen this guy play? Like, this guy should be in the NBA. This guy would be an outstanding NBA player. I can't believe he's not in the NBA," because what I was watching just was awesome footwork. I was watching great floor vision, great penetration. He stood out to me, right? He didn't look like he belonged in the D League. He looked like, to me, like he should be a starter in the NBA. At least that's what his skill level looked like. So I'm not going to say I predicted Linsanity, but I did think that he looked really good before he ever made an impact in the NBA.
Oh yeah, I've heard other people say similar things. He was kind of one of those players that hardcore hoopheads knew that he could be someone in the league. He was that kind of underground sensation, that underground player playing in the D League, as you said, that if you really were into hoops, if you really were watching everything you could and watching college, watching the D League, consuming all that basketball content and looking beyond the NBA at potential future stars in the NBA, he was kind of that underground player that people were talking about, that knowledgeable hardcore hoopheads were talking about. So yeah, obviously not taking credit for discovering him or predicting it, but no, he was definitely that player that if you're watching as much basketball as you were, and you do, then you kind of know about him.
So those are all the responses on Discord. Did we have any on Facebook?
Yeah, we had a couple of responses on Facebook as well. Jose says Isaiah Thomas's NBA Finals performance against the Lakers with a broken ankle. I do believe it was a sprained ankle, and that's not a singular play, but a lot of great plays on that bum ankle there. And I remember that as being one of the stories that I heard about getting into basketball, Derek, watching those old tapes, seeing those famous stories about classic NBA Finals performances and how legends came to be legends. And yeah, that performance by Isaiah Thomas was definitely one of them. And it's funny because they didn't win that series. The Lakers came back and won that series, but it was Isaiah and the Pistons taking that next step, coming so close, showing that heart, knowing that they could compete with the Lakers, coming back the next year and defeating them and sending Kareem out with a loss. You know, a big deal for the bad boy Pistons. So yeah, it goes to show that some great moments and legends are born even in losses.
Yeah, and I want our listeners to go back and watch the highlights from that game. He is not faking it. He is hurt. And many of the shots that he's making are completely off balance. And after the ball goes through the hoop, you can see him just like doing whatever he possibly can to limit the weight that he's putting on it, including limping on one leg, lightly touching that, that foot to the floor, et cetera, on the hurt ankle leg, et cetera. So yeah, incredible highlights by Zeke.
And again, it's also why it's important that we mention losses when we talk about a player's legacy, because those are character building. We can't pretend that some of the greatest players of all time didn't face adversity, that they didn't lose and come up short, because it was often a prelude to their triumphs.
Agreed. I think people also need to realize that, Isaiah Thomas was in the league for quite a while before he won his first title. I think people forget how early he came in to the NBA. His rookie season was in 81. 82. So he won a championship in his 8th NBA season. So pretty impressive. But like you state, yeah, the greats had to go through adversity.
Just makes their story so much more legendary. Absolutely. And Renee has some great picks here. Says Pippen's dunk over Ewing, Magic's three-pointer to end the 92 All-Star game, any of Kemp's dunks, the list of Lister being the most famous. You brought that one up. When Carter jumped over the player for a dunk with Team USA, that's Frederick Weiss, of course. Shaq bringing down the basket in Phoenix and New Jersey, and Rodman diving for a loose ball in that iconic photo. Yeah, that is more than 3, but we'll definitely reminisce about them, Derek. That's a good selection of highlights, and I remember them.
Yeah, Sean Kemp's dunk on Chris Gatling is an honorable mention here, where throws it down on him, and then Gatling daps him up after, and it's like, yeah, great. Yeah, exactly. You can't argue the greatness of that dunk, and if you're the recipient of that dunk, well, I'm sorry, you're going to end up on a poster. And Gatling knew that, and he was a good sport about it. But yeah, that's some great choices. That dunk, Pippen on Ewing, and then stepping over Ewing. What a dominant play, right? Showing his dominance at that moment, and obviously that pissed off Ewing, much like Chris Dudley got pissed off when Shaq, backed him in and threw it down hard on him and kind of pushed him to the floor, and Dudley ended up throwing the ball at him and saying F you, which you can clearly see. Yeah, some awesome dunks mentioned right there. So, Andrew, we're going to end the show on another community question. I asked the community what game they would like me to start a tournament on through the NLSC, and I haven't run a tournament in a couple of years now, and it's because it's such a time commitment, right? And being the organizer of it, and being the person that wants to record every game and post those highlights, and host the games through Parsec, etc. And it's just a lot of work. But Kid Cash reached out to me and stated he wanted to see another tournament, and I know that he'd want to participate in it as well, like he has in the past. A couple other NLSC members have also reached out to me and asked me when the next tournament was going to be. So yeah, let's have a quick debate on which game we should do it on. Vetman responded to this and stated GTA 6. So yeah, we're not going to be doing a basketball tournament on GTA 6 when it comes out, even if there is a basketball portion of it. So that's not going to happen. Although you're a fan of the GTA games, if there was a basketball portion, you may want me to run a tournament on that. But yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that one might be a bit tough. And, people talking about, we get an alternative to 2K. But remember, GTA is under the Take-Two umbrella as well.
QB1120 stated, NBA Street 2 is one game that I can always pick up and play and still enjoy. Yeah, that game is super pick up and play. The gameplay is always enjoyable. That would be a very, very good choice. WizCard Rush states, NBA Jam Legends on Fire Edition, NBA 2K11, and NBA 2K16 would all be great options. Legends on Fire Edition, obviously the John Z1 mod that brings classic teams and more classic players into NBA Jam OFE, so NBA Jam on Fire Edition. Obviously, that would be a blast, right? And I think, in my opinion, NBA Jam Legends on Fire Edition and NBA Street Volume 2 would be my top 2 picks. Prodido states second vote for a Jam Legends on Fire Edition. Then he also mentions NBA 2K14 and NBA Hang Time. Andrew, I'm a huge fan of NBA Hang Time. I think it's one of the best arcade basketball video games ever made. Just the gameplay is so dynamic and fun. I would love to run a tournament on that game as well. Avery states Jam Legends on Fire Edition, so another vote for that game and that mod. John Z1 himself states, any of my Jam projects, Legends, 1990s or 2020s, but also NBA Hang Time, I'd love to play that game competitively. Kid Cash himself, so Kid Cash 202 states, something lighthearted and fun, and he mentions Looney Tunes basketball. Interesting take there. Could be fun, right? I mean, we'd have to be using a lot of the same players because the roster isn't what it's going to be in like NBA games and number of teams and all of that stuff. But it's an idea. It might be fun. And heading over to Twitter for a few more responses, T Gentry at Bucky T says, any game with right stick dribbling, but I'll pass on the newest 2Ks. Steven at the Live King says maybe 2K14. That game stood the test of time, and I definitely agree there. The gameplay is just so good. Roger Ward, Live 01 Legend, states Live 04, 05, or 06. Not a surprise there. Garva at Garva_23 says Live 2003. Zoe at Lowgang_5 says NBA 2K14 with updated modded rosters. That's not a bad idea either. The other Live 01 legend, Stasho Bro at Nate Stasho, says NBA Live 2001. And leader of the Foot Clan states 2K25 or NBA Live 10. So nice to see some NBA sim games getting brought up here. I know that I ran a NBA Live 10 tournament, and people had a blast with that. Not only the people who participated in the tournament, but, watching the highlights on YouTube of all the games and whatnot. So some great suggestions there. But still, for me, for the next one, Andrew, I think I still got to go with either NBA Street Volume 2 or NBA Jam on Fire Edition.
Yeah, as much as I love sim games and those tournaments produce some great highlights, Delonte West becoming a virtual hardwood legend or solidifying his status as a virtual hardwood legend, as the case may be, there is something about arcade games that lend themselves to tournaments like this. And you have these favourites, NBA Street Volume 2, NBA Jam on Fire Edition, and the way that John Z1's mods have breathed some new life into NBA Jam on Fire Edition, which is fantastic. My pick for the best arcade game of all time, even vanilla, but adding that extra content, those missing legends, changing it up as he has really breathed new life into them. So yeah, I think with that enthusiasm, it would be a great tournament, great to watch. So yeah, that's probably the pick.
And I think because I've already done Jam on Fire Edition before, remember we had a great tournament. It was me and Stildo, Ken, in the finals. And I was using the Portland Trailblazers with Clyde Drexler and Bill Walton. And he was using the Celtics with Bird and Parrish and whatnot. I think because I did that the next tournament would be on Street Volume 2. And I think that would be a big hit with the community, and people would love watching those highlights. There's a great selection of teams that year, etc. Probably would run it with 8 different players. So, not make it too big of a tournament, make it sustainable and doable. That way it can be finished. But I think maybe I would do Street Volume 2 followed up by NBA Jam Legends on Fire Edition.
Makes sense. Absolutely. And as far as the sim games go, a lot of great choices there, but NBA Live 2003 stuck out to me for some reason. Probably because it's leaning that arcade direction, so up-tempo, so fast-paced. You've got that right-stick dribbling. You've got some really loud dunks. You've got some spectacular moves. That is an interesting one to consider as far as the sim games are concerned.
I agree. That actually might be my number one choice for a sim game. Either that or maybe even NBA Live 2000. I think that could be fun to have a tournament on just because the gameplay is so solid and so pick up and play. So, a lot of great suggestions, though, from the community.
Definitely, and I love that there's interest in those tournaments. As you say, it's been a couple of years since you've run one. It's a big undertaking, especially because you do like to produce the videos from them, and we love to watch them. So yeah, we'll obviously look at the possibilities. But in the meantime, please keep throwing out your suggestions for games you'd like to see us run tournaments on, as well as games you'd like to see us play and upload highlights of, and we'll certainly do our best to furnish you with those great virtual hardwood moments. And of course, we are Hardcore Hoopheads, Derek, so please keep sharing your favourite real highlights as well.
I also want to thank the community for a fantastic 4 years of the NLSC Top 10 Plays of the Week. That countdown just hit year 5, week 1. I have some nice NBA Live 95 music now in the countdown, behind the display of highlights, and year 5, week 1 did not disappoint. Just so many great highlights were submitted by the community, a variety of games, a variety of highlights, etc. So yeah, top 10 plays of the week going strong. Year 5, week 1, never missed a week. So thank you to the community.
Yep, keep those highlights coming. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us. And of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and blog the handles.
Yep, you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D for3G and at D for 384. I'm also on the NLSC, D for 3, and on YouTube, D for 3.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone!